people have this idea that we're all broken and that you've got to have these tragic lives, and that wasn't my case.
Can I just say you look fabulous?
Thank you.
Alan Heta-Cleaver is a pouwhakarai at the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective. He's done drag, stripping, street walking and escort work, starting out in the shadows of Karangahape Road and Queen Street in 1981.
Money was the motivating factor. 14 years old and couch surfing, and met a trans who was at university at the time, and she introduced me to sex work, and I thought, wow, okay, I can do this. I was sexually active from a young age.
Yep.
And thought, oh wow, I can get paid for doing something I enjoy doing.
What were the biggest challenges back then?
Police.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, totally, because it was illegal to be homosexual, it was illegal to be sex working. Vice squad were on top of you all the time, undercover police.
Did you end up getting convicted for anything?
Soliciting, prostitution, and then eventually went to jail at 18, and that was my little wake-up call.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, finally you're here. Do you really want to be like everyone else you know?
Times have changed. And I think police obviously, it's not criminal now, so it's a lot more accepted. Soliciting was an offence, and it was a criminal offence. And if you were a young constable on the beat, your sergeant expected you to, if there's an offence happening, to deal with it. And that meant arrest.
Is there still a vice squad?
No, the vice squad was years ago. That was long, long gone.
Detective Inspector Scott Beard represents the necessary shift in police thinking and behaviour since law reform. He's worked many high-profile inquiries in a 40-year career, winning much respect for his handling of the investigation into the 2018 murder of Grace Mullane.
So with the Prostitution Reform Act in 2003, soliciting prostitution became legal. So the police don't have to police that. But what we do need to do is work the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective in terms of if they have any of their workers who have complaints to make, help to facilitate that.
For the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective and the workers they represent, times have changed, but the memories of how it was remain fresh and raw.
The police, in those days, they would sort of come along like a sting operation and pretend they were clients, or, drive around the beat and ask to search your bag. And if they found condoms and lubricant in your bag, or even if they came in to check a massage parlour and, went through the rooms, we were told to hide our condoms because, you could be done for soliciting. Yeah, so that stuff was used as evidence, even though it's health promotion material, to, prevent sexually transmitted infections, STIs and HIV prevention.
What was the attraction? What was your motivation?
I guess for me would be money, like debt, and then making quick money real fast to pay off a debt. At the time, I think it was like $20,000, yeah. And then I got that paid off, 3 months or something or other. And then, my time in the industry would have been 7 years working in the industry, and I loved it. I don't have any regrets about it.
Anna is now an advocate for sex workers, particularly Māori and Pacifica.
What's changed in the time since you first entered the industry?
Oh, just to, that our people are no longer criminalised for, soliciting, and that, workers can work independently, they can work from home, they can work online.
And sex work online, using the internet as a tool, has been almost as much of a game changer as the law reform itself.
Kia ora! I am very excited United, we are celebrating 20 years of decriminalisation of sex work here in Aotearoa. I am a sex worker, I'm a sex work activist, I'm a writer, and I'm a performance artist determined to burn the patriarchy.
That would stop the conversation, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it seems to.
Vixen is 26, a digital native who works cyberspace to the max as an activist, performance artist and sex worker.
It was as easy as putting up an Instagram story, a link to my PayPal, send me some money and I'll send you some nudes.
Help the freshies out. What does the sex industry cover?
For me, I define it as the exchange of the illusion of intimacy, and it's usually sexual in nature, but that can be anything from online sex work to full service, to stripping, to phone sex, to camming, to dominatrix.
What do you mean camming?
So that's camming. That's like when you work as a cam model on the internet. You set up a webcam and people send you money. There's OnlyFans. It's really, sex work is a very adaptable industry, and it's the oldest profession, and it exists in a multitude of ways.
Parlours, brothels, strip clubs, websites, home visits, all legally part of it these days. But some things haven't changed.
In my dealings with sex workers, it's always been around, you know, if you're a student, money on StudyLink isn't enough. And so this is a secondary income. If you're a mama and you're coming out of a divorce or something going through the family court, and, you know, your husband freezes off funds for you and your children, you know, this is a secondary income that is, I'm not going to say it's a quick fix, but something that can put food on the table, you know, put the warrant of fitness, you know, the wheels, you know, the wheels on the car to operate. Think just, you know, human things.
I was very attracted to sex work from a independent contractor perspective. It means that I get to have control over the hours I work. There's not a limit to my earning potential. Sex work is an industry that really complements my lifestyle, and through that I'm able to focus on other avenues of my life, such as writing and activism and performing, and I'm very grateful for that.
The ayes are 60. The noes.
After the break, how the law reform almost didn't happen. We're with the MP who ushered it in and made history.
Welcome back. The story behind the historic law change back in 2003 was every bit as dramatic as the changes in attitude that sex workers now take for granted. Tim Barnett was the Labour MP for Christchurch Central, and it was he who drove the parliamentary process through on the back of tireless advocacy from Dame Catherine Healy and the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective.
The ayes are 60. The noes are 59. Abstention 1. The bill will be read a third time. Unlock the bill.
This is a profound New Zealand success story, and this is a human rights issue which many countries have got into complete mess over and continue to mess up. And we do have a solution here.
Tim Barnett, 20 years ago, and the vote on prostitution law reform was on a knife edge.
The current law creates victims and protects perpetrators. It is unenforceable and it is implemented inconsistently.
He was working the numbers, trying to persuade and reassure MPs, but there were no guarantees.
A lot of the time, I think, for MPs, it was the heart and the head. Like the heart told you this is wrong and damaging, we shouldn't be endorsing sex work, and the head said it's not the role of politicians to say what's right or wrong in this area because we can't stop it. There's inevitability. We've got to make it minimise the harm as much as we can. So the whole legislation was really based on minimising harm, particularly to sex workers, but also to wider society.
What misconceptions did you have to address about the sex industry?
There's a misconception that there were lots of young workers who were going to be trapped in the industry for years, and that we wouldn't be able to impact on that. And it took conversations in the committee to get it right, Parliamentarians Committee, to push the illegality, the illegal behaviour was the responsibility of the client.
And the responsibility of brothel owners as well. Some of them weren't happy with the law changes.
No, not at all, because they lost a lot of their power. And because we're going back, 80s and 90s and, sort of then 20 years ago, they had the power. And if somebody wanted to see a particular girl, or she had bad experience from him before or whatever, and he wanted to see her again, it was kind of like the brothel owner would say, you have to see her. You have to see her. You have to see, that's just how it is.
Long before it came to a parliamentary vote, a whole lot of luck was involved.
Took it to the Labour caucus and they thought, well, here's this little old backbencher from Christchurch. There's 40 bills in the biscuit tin. It was the members' ballot. It's always the numbers taken out of a biscuit tin in Parliament. And Labour policy said we support the decriminalisation of soliciting, so that was the street work. And so, yes, this is kind of in line with policy. We'll put it in, we'll humour him, it will never get taken out of the ballot. And so I put it in, there were 42, 43 bills in the ballot that took out 3, and it was one of them the next day. So that's when reality hit everyone. I thought, oh my God, we're going to have to talk about this one.
But getting legislation across the line was never going to be a sure thing. While Tim was working alongside colleagues, activists were working on bringing decision makers around.
Not only years, but today, the toughest politicians have been, tangata whenua Māori MPs as well as Pacifica MPs, because, there's the cultural aspect in our tinana, but also, religious perspectives as well. I remember when I spoke to MP Mahara at the time in the Labour Party, he was elected then, that, he sort of said to me, hey girl, what are you going to do for our people? And I just sort of said to him, I try not to get really stirred here because I always get, tangiwero. But I just sort of said to him, for as long as I am involved in this work, my mahi will be, dedicated to tangata whenua and Pacifica sex workers and ethnic minorities.
A lot of the MPs were understanding where we were coming from, to get this through, but there were those that Māori, I came across a couple of Māori ones that weren't so keen on the idea.
Why?
Because they sort of just wanted to know what the bill would do, this new bill would do for Māori. And as I explained to them, the current bill is not working for Māori. It's not working. There's no rights. They have no rights in their work. And neither does anybody. And the important thing is to have those rights to be able to say no to their clients or business owners or whoever if they felt they were in a bad situation.
In the Aotearoa of 2003, Tim Barnett perceived a society ready for change.
Even people who didn't understand an awful lot about sex work accepted that punishing the sex worker was the wrong thing to do, and that moral judgment in the law was probably never going to succeed greatly. And of course then it was only 15 years after the conversations on homosexual law reform, and I think a lot of people felt it was kind of the same thing happening over again.
But the pressure on MPs to vote against it was immense, led by the likes of conservative think tank, the Maxim Institute.
This bill is an affront to the values of ordinary New Zealanders. They're not judgmental Puritans, they are common sense people who know right from wrong.
Also, there were legitimate concerns over female exploitation and young sex workers being trapped inside the industry.
We wanted to support people to get out of the industry, but when the activity is illegal and you've been fined and you've got a criminal record, that was the best guarantee you can never get out because you had all that hanging around your neck. So clear all that away and just focus on moving people through as quickly as could happen, but accept the inevitability of the activity.
After 3 years of debate, testing ideas and making compromises, legislation was finally ready for the vote. Nothing was certain, including Georgina Bayer, who would, in the final hour, help tip the balance.
I support this bill for all the prostitutes I have ever known who died before the age of 20.
Her searing testimony of rape silenced the public gallery.
It would have been nice to have known that instead of having to deal out the justice myself afterwards to that person, I may have been able to approach the authorities, the police in this case, and say, I was raped! And yes, I'm a prostitute, and no, it was not right that I should have been raped because I said no.
In the end, it came down to just one vote.
We got through by 60 votes to 59.
The ayes are 60, the noes are 59, abstention 1. The bill will be read a third time. Unlock the door.
We had half the ACT caucus in favour, the whole Green caucus. We had a good bunch of National MPs and then some Labour MPs against. So we really had to build the coalition from right across Parliament. New Zealand First were all against.
That was then. What about now?
I don't think anyone in Parliament would want it to go back to what it was. I think now we're into the territory of could it be tweaked in some places to make it better. And there are 2 or 3 areas where it needs to be better around human rights protection. There were difficulties about the coverage of migrants by the legislation, particularly international students who are allowed to do paid work to help fund their study when they're in New Zealand, not allowed to do sex work. So that's a very direct discrimination, picking sex work out and banning a certain group. So that's clearly discrimination in law and it's wrong.
A new generation of sex workers have never known what it was like working the streets and parlours pre-2003. For them, it's a whole different world.
Being a sex worker in this decriminalised model is a tremendous privilege. I'm very grateful to the mahi that the sex workers did before us to be able to give us these rights, because through that, by having my work recognised as work, when I had a workplace-related industry at the strip club, I now have had ACC, cover that. It's really, we're very lucky. The perks that I have from operating under a decriminalised module is something that I do not take lightly, and I'm very grateful for the fight that they had to do for us.
Up next, 20 years, the legacy of decriminalisation and unfinished business.
Kia ora anō. We've come a long way since 2003 and the law reform around prostitution. And as I said at the top, look, the sky hasn't fallen in. Yes, we've had law change, but that doesn't mean society is entirely accepting or comfortable with sex work and sex workers.
Oh, that's been phenomenal to see the shift just within society and not having that police pressure. When it's illegal, you're pushed into the shadows, but I feel now we're able to do our mahi from a place of light.
Alan came back into the sex work industry 11 years ago, after floating in and out since he was 18 and balancing a career in between. He does it now because he loves it. Alan is 56.
Nowadays, things must be different. You don't need to be walking the streets anymore.
No, not at all. You got that choices, and that's been the amazing thing. Is first of all, you can advertise openly, online or in the newspapers or whatever. You got all these online platforms, and I can work from home as an independent worker, so I don't have to be freezing on the street corner with hardly any clothes on.
That sense of safety can't be underestimated in a job that's been defined by fear and abuse. Now, when sex workers are attacked or abused, they can go to the police and be taken seriously.
Way back before 1986, if a sex worker made a complaint of rape, it was probably really, that's part of your job, just get used to it, accept it. With the legislation change, and you didn't need corroboration with the legislation change. Prior to that, you did need corroboration for rape. Now we can investigate it. And as long as the victim is credible, reliable, consistent, we can take cases to court with no other evidence but their word.
It's been a radical change of mindset for the police. Gone are the days of entrapment, arrests and harassment, but there's still a wariness among sex workers when it comes to reporting violence and rape and trusting the justice system to see it through.
Look, I still think there's some holding back from reporting to the police from within the sex workers industry. But I think the relationship that we have with the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective certainly make it easier for those who do want to come forward.
Acceptance from the police is one thing, but what about the rest of us? Despite law change and a shift in attitude, how do whānau respond?
My mother is a very big supporter. She is my biggest fan. When I sat down and told her, look, for a long time I told her that I was working as a bar person, and I said one day, look, sorry Mum, I'm actually stripping. She just goes, I know, I've seen you pole dance. She knew, you can't lie to your mother. My father, when I told him, we haven't spoken since, so my mum though, she loves me enough for two parents.
My mum has always been my rock. She has supported me and my siblings in this work, and without my whānau and their backing, I wouldn't stand where I am.
Now, how would you feel if one of your moko decided they're going to get into the industry?
Oh, ka pai, it's just like any other profession. It's a job, and I'd want to make sure that they, know about safety and, condoms and safe sex and what have you, and I'll be taking them into places like NZPC and getting informed.
Alan talks of how law change has brought him out of darkness and into the light, how he and sex workers like him can now live and work in the open without having to look over their shoulders for the police. Still, there's a way to go before the so-called oldest profession truly comes out of the shadows.
The biggest challenge that strippers especially experience, from my experience, is social stigma. It's one thing for sex work to be decriminalised and for me to be able to stand and say that sex work is work, but it's another thing for people to actually internalise that and see that. And because sex workers are a group of a diverse community where we're trans, we're takatapui, we're disabled, we are the other in society, so there's already so much stigma pre-existing from those communities, and then you do something as bold as sex work, it really can leave you feeling ostracised from a lot of communities.
There's heaps of positive gains that our people are no longer criminalised, and that stigma and discrimination still exists, but sex workers are ordinary people just like you and I. Some people always say to me, oh, I couldn't do that kind of job. Well, I always think, well, I couldn't do your job.
Tim Barnett's days as an MP are well behind him. He's now a political advisor in the Northern Territory of Australia. 20 years on, he reflects on the historic law change he helped usher in.
I was always convinced that this was the right model. I didn't know that the police were going to line up so effectively behind the legislation. I wasn't sure if other government bodies would also sort of understand they had to treat this like a normal occupation. And some of it was, I wasn't sure if the courts would be effective as they have been in looking at the legislation and identifying what the intention was and making decisions accordingly. All that has worked as well. I think it's worked superbly, actually, much better than I could ever have hoped for.